Aloha, and welcome back to Talk Story with John Waihee. And our guest today is a former legislator. Name is Representative Jim Shon. Now, Jim's an old friend of mine. I say that with all that it means because we have known each other for it seems like well, at least for a century. We uh, and we were actually delegates to the 1978 Constitutional Convention. So here we are, Jim. Aloha, welcome. And
Thank you.
first of all, tell us a little bit about yourself because we are actually going to be discussing what I consider to be probably one of the most important political uh, conversations that people could have in the state of Hawaii. But before we get there, I wanted people to get to know you a little bit so that they know that this conversation is something worth having.
Okay, well, I arrived in Hawaii after the Peace Corps, 3.5 years in Korea, where I experienced one form of democracy. Uh, Studied Korean history here, worked at the UH, ran for office a couple of times and lost, which is a good thing. Actually, it teaches you. I started a neighborhood board in Waikiki. I was elected, as John mentioned, to the 78 ConCon. Um, Later, I spent 12 years in the legislature, sometimes lobbying that governor that's looking at me now for my bills. Uh, and then after that, went on to uh, be in charge of the charter schools in Hawaii. Um, and then I've been a labor arbitrator. And then for a number of years, I was head of the Hawaii Educational Policy Center. So I've kind of seen democracy from a lot of different angles.
And also at the policy educational, the educational center, which you headed. I
Yeah,
mean, that's a course really on public policy.
well, I've taught public policy for undergraduate and graduate nurses, for graduate public health, for graduate social work, and for graduate college of ed. Probably all telling them the same story over and over again about policy. And in fact, you addressed one of my classes about a year or so ago of
Yeah,
experienced
I
teachers.
did. You
Yeah.
know, interestingly enough, just to fill out some of the whole the conversation there is that I just talked to Tom Coffin,
Oh,
who is doing a book about social work in Hawaii, and what he was writing about was the change over the years from what at least social workers perceived their roles were, and that in the 70s, 80s, 90s, social workers thought of themselves as activists, as
uh-huh.
change agents. And now, probably not as much, maybe more in terms of, service delivery. And I just wanted to know whether or not you felt that in in the delivery of public policy, we have sort of slipped into mediocre.
I would say we've slipped into zero. Uh, Most of the public policy centers at the UH are not funded. They take a professor who's already funded and then take some of their time uh, and say, well, why don't you be in charge of this? They give them no money, no time, and so basically, uh, you get the idea that government in general is not interested in authentic, independent analysis. And then if you look at what's happened, even at the legislature, the Legislative Reference Bureau used to have experts. They don't have experts anymore. The majority research uh, functions used to have experts. Now they just do press releases mostly. Um,
Wow.
so what we find is a gradual slide from thoughtful, informed, being open to new ideas, uh, respectful of other voices, not afraid to take a chance. When Hawaii was just being, built after statehood, there was a great deal of excitement. The university was a think tank for government, um, and there were many, many voices that were taken seriously. Now, not so much. The only guys at the UH anybody pays attention to are the economists. But social work, no. Uh, Aging, no. Education is a $4 billion a year operation for public ed in Hawaii. And we don't think we need an independent, well-funded educational policy center. Everybody
Wow.
thinks they know it. And that kind of gets to the legislature itself,
Well,
which,
yeah, let's get there because the reason why there are a lot of reasons why you should be a guest on this show, but the particular reason for this afternoon was I've been reading some of your email, and you are discussing the idea of calling together or somehow organizing what, for the better word, I'm calling, or I guess you called it first, a people's convocation or the convocation for democracy.
yes,
Now, why would such a thing? I'm just going to, jump a couple of steps. Why would such a thing be necessary? Why would you be interested in such a
yeah.
convocation?
As I started discussing the state of democracy, the kind of feedback I was getting from interested people who are knowledgeable is that we become democratically lazy, impatient, um, uninterested in detail, uninterested in the process, less thoughtful, uh, and less open and drifting towards a more authoritarian view. And
But what? Give me some specifics, though. I
okay,
mean, okay.
okay, right now in the legislature, um, you remember this well probably. When a bill was before a committee and they're going to make a decision, the chair might say, "Well, I want to amend it this way or that way." That's not a decision making time. A new
Yeah.
bill with all the text and all the amendments and the committee report and a signature page would go around and be circulated to virtually every office. And
You mean
I,
they
as a
don't do that anymore? Wasn't that
no,
a
no, I
requirement in the rules? I mean,
no.
I thought the legislative rules required
Well, by the way, the rules have no legal authority according to other lawyers. But here's the thing: a
that.
few years
Wow.
ago, people got all excited. Oh, let's watch them vote. Let's take a roll call vote. So what happens now is that people vote without seeing the amended bill. Now, when you say this to an average person, do you think it's wise and you should vote yes or no on a bill you have not seen? No, of course not. The other thing is that when a bill comes out of committee, it must, by internal rule, be defective. It
What does
must
that mean? I mean, explain that to the people out there. What
it
does it
means
mean?
this bill should take effect in the year 2150, right?
So this is deliberately
Yes,
making the bill so it could not be effectuated.
That's right. And most of these bills, whether they have money or not, are going to the money committees. So the respect of the subject matter committee, I was for many years chair of health. We were responsible for being the expert eyes and ears and analysis for everybody else in health. And we had staff that knew more than anybody else. But now this bill limps out of committee, and whatever I thought, it goes directly to finance or in the Senate. It's even worse. If I make a major amendment on a bill in the Senate and it is referred to Ways and Means, they don't have to have a hearing on the amendment. All
Wow.
they do is they have a decision making.
Well, wait a
So,
minute, wait a minute. I don't understand. When you say they don't have to have a hearing on the amendment,
no,
that means they take the bill as they receive it and vote on it.
that's right.
So, there's never an actual, there isn't an actual hearing on the substance of the amendment because it got passed without being passed around or
Yeah.
anything like that.
Now, there's a caveat to this. My computer can send an electronic testimony to their computer, uh, but there's no guarantee that it will be read or anything like that. Uh, Occasionally, when they have decision making, they might bring up somebody from a department or whatnot to answer questions, but that's not a public hearing. A public hearing is not my computer talking to yours. It's me talking to you. That's a public hearing, face to
Right.
face. That's respecting the public. If I want to testify, too bad, so sad, we don't have time for you.
Well, how much of that has to do with the pandemic, though?
No, this is every critique I'm talking about is before the pandemic, before it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Pandemic actually taught us how to do Zoom when we were resisting it for years. So the pandemic has helped that part. The pandemic has eliminated the idea that if you're on the neighbor islands, too bad, this is Oahu, right?
Well, just this past week in the Senate, for example, there was well, there are two things happening in the legislature, and are these? I guess my question is, would these be examples of where we are? First of all, in the House, you had two major bills, I think, dealing with minimum wage and taxing unemployment benefits that just didn't get a hearing. Just it's not like they were voted down; they just never got heard. That would
Well,
be. Is that an example of what you're discussing?
not really,
Oh,
because every committee chair gets a gazillion bills and they have to say, we're going to hear these, we're not
yeah.
going to hear those, right? So every committee chair has the power to say no, mostly. Okay.
Well, what about what happened in the Senate, which is that a bill came down and for one entirely different subject, but and the title of the bill was something relating to state government, and
Right.
it got gutted, and the next thing you knew, uh, within less than 24 hours, or at least less than 48 hours, they were having a hearing on removing any Native Hawaiian influence on the tourism
Yeah.
industry.
So uh, what I think that represents is a disrespectful use of a regular bill, like what we used to call a short form bill.
Right.
There's no content, and you stick a new content in, you take it down to the floor again and get first, second reading, bring it back and have a hearing on the new content.
Well, in this case, there was content, and it just got on the it just got sliced and diced in the committee. We're going to
Yes.
take a short break, and
Okay.
we want to come back and we want to talk about. Okay, you got all of this stuff going on. What is it that we could do about it? What can we do to make things better? Which is the purpose of this. So we'll be right back after this short break. Welcome back to Talk Story with John Waihee. Now, I tell you, Jim, before we get into your remedy, we during the break we were starting to talk about why haven't people like said anything about this? Like jump up and down. And I'm talking about the members of the legislature. You were a member, and you know for a fact that you wouldn't have tolerated some of these process. I know that. I mean, I've had many a conversation with you when you were deliberately trying to make more sunshine shine through than the sun was capable of.
Yeah. Well, I think you have to realize even legislators today, even those who in the early 2000s, people like Gary Hoosier and whatnot that are interested in reform, um, they never knew anything different
Mm.
than the critiques what I'm talking about. They never knew the idea of being able to look at and sign your name to
Well,
vote.
that's the way it used to be when you were in the
That's
legislature and
right.
when I was in the governor's office.
That's right. They never knew a situation where when you submit testimony, no one's allowed to see it until 1 hour before the hearing now. So
Wow.
no one, and the culture of the ledge is, we prefer you just stand on your written testimony. So if you're a powerful guy or you're a State Department and you just stand up and say, uh, I stand on my written testimony. Nobody knows what that is. Nobody can see it during the hearing. If I want to testify and challenge Director Waihee of such and such a department and their testimony, I can't, right? So,
Wow.
the way I'm approaching this is I'm sending out this idea of can we create a process and perhaps a safe and effective um, virtual and real convocation that before it solicits ideas about what people feel need to be improved. Not everything is totally wrong. Not
Right, right.
everything is terribly bad, right?
And now at this convocation, is it? I mean, are people going to be able to, or are people going to be discussing issues that they may have a particular feeling for?
No. And this is why. You can get bogged down in, I want this bill, I want this law, I don't want that one. And that may motivate people to want to be interested in process. Nationally, we know if you're interested in voting, suddenly process matters. Right?
Okay.
But in Hawaii, it's not voting process. It's the democratic process. The difficulty of getting public documents, the difficulty of openness.
Oh, don't we have a law that says public documents are available to the public?
Um,
Uh,
it has been a struggle, you know, to get it timely, to get it affordable. Of course, during the pandemic, the governor basically suspended the Sunshine Law, so that's been a problem. But in general, everything being online, you should be able to get a public document with a click of a mouse. That's a problem. And
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. You mean to tell me that you submit testimony, for example, and it's all electronic, and people have a record, send things in electronically, but as a citizen, I can't pull out that document?
not until 1 hour before, if even later. And what this also means, John, is that the members of the committee, they're at a big disadvantage too. They can't read the testimony in time to really prepare for the hearing if they want to be informed or come up with good questions. So, and the fact that so much goes to just two committees, it's a great concentration of power.
Okay, so
I
you're
have
going to
not,
have this convocation,
yeah,
and the
uh,
convocation will be focused on what?
democratic process, open government, sunshine, respect, thoughtful processes, time to deliberate. How do we make democracy work better for us, for the citizen, for even other elected officials, which are disrespected? Maybe nobody sat down and said, let's disrespect everybody. But we have drifted more and more uh, into this, you know, kind of fog, a democratic fog. So my idea is to try to create a process after the session, because I don't want people to feel that if they say they want to participate, they're going to be irritating a legislator whose vote they need. Right.
Hmm.
So we got from May until January to pull off something. I mean, for example, even though the rules of the House or Senate are not really binding, they could be an interesting platform of how we would amend them to make the process better, more respectful, more time, even even something that is uh, as easy as introducing a bill. The bill cutoff comes so soon that we cut off ideas, and the subject matter committees, oh, I only
Well,
have,
but I've heard it said though that the reason, I mean, you got the entire interim to think up ideas. Why do you need time in the actual session to submit a bill? I mean, why? What are you shooting for? I mean,
well,
what is
what one thing I'm shooting for is that the expert committees on health and education and transportation should have more time and be respected in their product. Okay. So the idea of the convocation is that for a period of time, through surveys and others, we will collect ideas and collect potential solutions. We will try to create a kind of well-informed steering committee to look through these and to try to structure a sensible convocation that could be both virtual and face to face if
how
necessary.
does that all of that get organized?
Good question. Uh, because right
Yeah.
now I'm asking people, what do you think? Is this worth trying?
Well, I got to
I am
tell
not,
you that I've
the
seen
greatest
like the response.
fundraiser or anything like that.
Well, then
Um,
I think we're going to get to that part. But one of the things is that I've seen, your some of your emails going out, and it seems to be collecting a certain amount of momentum. I mean, there are a lot of people who are interested in something like this. So, and it's not just Jim Shon in the wilderness anymore. But we were both in the '78 Constitutional Convention, and that took a lot of staff time. It took a lot of our time. It took it just takes time that uh, I don't. What's to make this a different exercise?
right now, I'm trying to discuss with people um, the logistics of this. It's a little bit like a weekend Democratic convention. It's a little bit like a con where you had committees preparing before it, maybe doing some policy papers, and culminating later when we all feel safer in an actual event.
Hmm.
That's the way I'm thinking about it. Um, but at this point, I'm still I'm still collecting. Count me in. I'm interested.
Right, and you seem to be doing pretty well. And I'm assuming that because you're not bringing this up, you're not looking for any kind of government support for this. So that it's really a private
Yeah.
sector initiative, and I guess that it may allow it, therefore, to have the kind of freedom that you seem to want in doing this.
you know. So yeah, the fact is this is not a government funded anything. Uh, and this gives us a tremendous amount of flexibility to design this a new kind of, I call it a convocation because it's not a convention and it's nothing else like that, right? But it is an attempt to create a kind of movement where we can take the product to elected and appointed officials and say, we would like you to change to be better in this way. In the ledge, it could be amending the rules
Mm.
or other behavior. For the governor and others, it could be uh, make it easier to get documents, make it
Well,
easier to be open.
this is
Even something, there are many things, John, where people are losing faith in the competency and openness and fairness of government. Obviously, when people are indicted for some, crime, that's an issue. But even inspecting care homes, we had to sue the state to inspect our care homes in a timely way. And even after all that, look what happened in the tragedy in Hilo, where they weren't
right.
inspecting, they weren't posting the inspections. The problems were not online for everybody to see. That's basic implementation.
Well, I
And
love it,
the
Jim.
lack of implementing is a big problem. We want to get it better.
Well, I think that that's what people need to understand, that this is ultimately an effort to make the process better, to make everything function better. But I love the idea of a democracy initiative and a convocation. I mean, like, it's sad, but one of the bylines for today's show was that, we may seem like we're chasing sunshine in the Aloha State, which is a little bit of what this is all about. So, Jim, at some point in time, I'm thinking you're going to be announcing, making all of this a lot
Yes,
more public, and and people can get involved with the democracy initiative and convocation. We're running out of time. I know we could talk about this, especially two guys like you and me who have lived forever, practically. I want to thank you so much for agreeing to be on my show. I know that this movement is just getting started, and I want to encourage people out there to get in touch with Jim Shon, get on his mailing list, and keep up with this movement. And for all of you listening, I need to mention the fact that ThinkTech Hawaii is currently holding its spring 2021 fund drive. We need to raise $20,000. So if you got any extra change, we would appreciate receiving a little bit of it. All right, everybody, mahalo, and we will see you in 2 weeks. Thanks, Jim.